The power had been out for exactly 43 minutes when I saw the tow truck backing into my driveway, and I knew immediately that Sharon was behind this. I sprinted out of my house in Springfield, Illinois, still wearing my house slippers, waving my arms like a madman as the driver started attaching chains to my generator cart. "Hey, stop! What are you doing?" I shouted, my breath forming clouds in the freezing February air. The tow truck driver, a heavy-set man with a graying beard, looked at me with the weary expression of someone who had dealt with too many property disputes. He held up a work order. "Got a complaint from the HOA. Says this generator cart is in violation of community standards. Needs to be removed immediately. During a power outage." My voice cracked with disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" He shrugged. "I just do what I'm told, buddy. Take it up with your HOA." I could see Sharon Patterson standing 3 houses down, arms crossed over her puffy jacket, watching the scene unfold with what I could only describe as satisfaction. She was the president of the Meadowbrook Commons Homeowners Association, a position she treated like she was managing a small nation rather than a suburban neighborhood of 86 homes. "That generator is running critical equipment," I yelled, trying to block the tow truck driver's path. "You can't just take it, sir. You need to step back, or I'll have to call the police for interference. My name is Donovan, and I am a licensed electrician who had lived in Meadowbrook Commons for 3 years. When I bought my house, I knew what I was getting into with the HOA. The rules were extensive but seemed reasonable at first. No lawn decorations except during holidays. Trash cans must be hidden from street view. Standard stuff. But Sharon had taken over as president 8 months ago, and things had gotten progressively worse. The generator cart in question wasn't some eyesore. It was a heavy-duty portable generator mounted on a wheeled cart that I had built myself, painted a neutral gray color, positioned on the side of my house near the electrical panel. During storms or outages, I could wheel it out, connect it to my transfer switch, and power essential systems. The cart made it easier to move the 200-pound generator without throwing out my back. But what Sharon didn't know, what nobody except me and the previous owner of my house knew, was that my generator wasn't just powering my house. It was connected to a shared Sump pump system that serviced 6 basements in our cluster of homes. The previous owner, an engineer named Robert Chen, had set up this system 15 years ago when the subdivision was built. Our 6 houses sat in a low-lying area with a high water table, and instead of each house having its own sump pump with individual discharge points, Robert had designed a centralized system with one powerful pump and a shared discharge line that directed water to the retention pond at the edge of the property. My house happened to have the electrical panel with the most capacity, so the pump motor was wired through my service. During normal conditions, it ran off grid power. But during outages, my generator was the only thing keeping that pump operational. The system was grandfathered in under old building codes, technically legal but definitely unusual. Robert had documented everything in the property disclosure when I bought the house, and I had maintained the system dutifully since moving in. I tried explaining this to the tow truck driver, but he wasn't interested. "Not my problem, man. You want your generator back. Here's the impound lot address." He handed me a greasy business card. Within minutes, my generator cart was hooked up and being dragged away. I stood in my driveway, shaking with rage and anxiety, watching my lifeline disappear down Maple Avenue. The temperature was dropping. The weather forecast predicted the power would be out for at least 8 to 12 hours due to ice damage on the transmission lines. And now, in 6 basements including mine, Water was slowly beginning to accumulate with nowhere to go. I marched down to Sharon's house, a pristine two-story colonial with decorative shutters and a front door wreath that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I pounded on her door harder than I should have, but I was beyond caring about politeness. She opened the door with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sharon was 52 years old, with highlighted blonde hair styled in that specific way that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager." She wore a cashmere sweater and designer jeans, looking completely unruffled by the chaos she had just caused. "Isaac, good afternoon. What can I do for you?" Her tone was saccharine sweet, which made me even angrier. "You just had my generator towed during a power outage, Sharon." "What were you thinking?" "Oh, that old thing." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's been an eyesore for months. Multiple neighbors have complained. According to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our HOA covenant, no mechanical equipment can be visible from the street or adjacent properties. You received 2 written warnings, which you ignored. It's a power outage. People need electricity. Then you should have a permanently installed standby generator like the rest of us civilized homeowners," she replied coolly. "One that's properly hidden behind approved screening. Your rolling contraption looks like something from a construction site. This is a premium neighborhood, Isaac. We have standards." "That generator is running the shared Sump pump system," I said through gritted teeth. 6 houses, Sharon. 6 basements are going to flood if that pump isn't running." She blinked. "What are you talking about? Everyone has their own sump pump." "No, we don't. Not in this cluster. Houses 42 through 47 share a centralized pump system. My generator has been keeping it operational. Without power, those basements are going to flood within hours depending on the groundwater infiltration rate." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. "That can't be right. I've never heard of such a thing. Just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Call Robert Chen if you don't believe me. He designed the whole system." "Robert moved to Oregon 2 years ago," she said, regaining her composure. "And even if what you're saying is true, which I doubt, you should have applied for a variance before installing unapproved equipment. The rules exist for everyone, Isaac. You don't get special treatment." "This isn't about special treatment. This is about preventing property damage to 6 homes." "Then I suggest you go retrieve your generator, have it properly permitted and screened, and we can discuss a variance application at next month's board meeting." She started closing the door. "Until then, it stays impounded. Good day." The door clicked shut in my face. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, trying to process the absurdity of what had just happened. Then I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I tried the impound lot. The woman who answered told me the retrieval fee was $350, plus a $100 per day storage fee, and they didn't accept credit cards, only cash or money order. The lot closed at 5 p.m. I checked my watch. It was already 4:15. Even if I drove there right now, my bank was closed due to the power outage, and the nearest ATM that might have backup power was 15 minutes away. I wasn't going to make it. Next, I called my neighbor in House 43, Marcus Wellington. He was a dentist who worked in downtown Springfield, usually reasonable and level-headed. His wife answered, sounding stressed. "Marcus isn't home. He's stuck at the office dealing with the power situation there. Can I help you with something?" I explained the situation as quickly as I could. She listened in growing horror. "Wait, so our basement is going to flood? Isaac, we just finished renovating down there. We have new carpet, new drywall, Marcus's entire home office set up. I know I'm trying to fix this, but I need to document what's happening. Can you check your basement and take photos of the water level? "Oh my God, I'll call you back." I made similar calls to the other 4 houses in our cluster. 2 didn't answer. One was Mrs. Eleanor Grimes in House 44, an elderly widow who started crying when I told her she might need to move belongings from her basement. The other was the Nakamura family in House 46, who had just left for a vacation in Florida that morning. I left them a voicemail that I knew would ruin their trip. By 5 p.m., my phone was ringing constantly. Marcus had checked his basement. Water was already seeping in through the floor cracks, pooling near the walls. Mrs. Wellington sent me photos showing a quarter-inch of standing water across their basement floor. Mrs. Grimes couldn't get downstairs by herself and was panicking. The family in House 45, the Rodriguezes, had their teenage son check, and he reported similar water infiltration. I drove to the impound lot anyway, desperate and probably foolish. The gates were locked, chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Through the fence, I could see my generator cart sitting among wrecked cars and other impounded vehicles. A sign on the gate listed business hours clearly. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Closed weekends and holidays. Tomorrow was Saturday. The water wasn't going to wait until Monday. I called Sharon again. It went straight to voicemail. I called her 2 more times with the same result. I drove back to her house and rang the doorbell repeatedly. No answer, though I could see lights on inside, powered by what was probably her fancy permanently installed generator. At 6:30 p.m., Marcus showed up at my door, soaked from the knees down, his face pale with anger. "Isaac, my basement has 3 inches of water now. It's coming in faster than I can shop vac it out. My wife is crying. We have $20,000 in damage already and it's getting worse. I know, I'm trying everything I can think of. This is insane. How can the HOA just tow critical equipment during an emergency?" "Sharon doesn't believe it's critical," I said bitterly. "She thinks I'm making it up. Making it up. The evidence is literally flooding my basement right now." Marcus ran his hands through his wet hair. "We need to do something. Call the police, call a lawyer, I don't know, but we can't just let this happen." "The police won't help with a civil HOA dispute," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "But maybe if we document everything, we can sue the HOA for damages." "Sue them." "Isaac, by the time any lawsuit goes through, my entire basement will be destroyed." He pulled out his phone and started typing. "I'm calling an emergency restoration company. Someone needs to pump this water out before it reaches the electrical outlets. Mrs. Wellington called me 20 minutes later, nearly hysterical. The emergency restoration company wanted $2,000 just to come out during a power outage on a weekend evening, with no guarantee they could actually stop the water infiltration. They could pump it out, but without the Sump pump system working, it would just keep refilling. I sat at my kitchen table, my own phone flashlight providing the only illumination since my generator was gone, trying to figure out what to do. The situation was spiraling into a disaster that would cost tens of thousands of dollars in damage across 6 homes, all because Sharon Patterson wanted to flex her HOA authority over a supposed aesthetic violation. Then I had an idea. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. I called the Springfield Fire Department non-emergency line and explained that 6 basements were flooding due to a sump pump failure during the power outage. I wasn't sure they could help, but flooding was an emergency, right? The dispatcher listened politely and said they would send someone to assess the situation. 40 minutes later, a fire department SUV pulled up, and Battalion Chief Miguel Santos stepped out. He was in his 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and the kind of competence that immediately put me at ease. I explained everything. The shared sump pump system, the generator that powered it, the HOA towing it during the outage, and the rapidly flooding basements. Chief Santos listened carefully, asked several questions, and then walked with me to Marcus's house to inspect the flooding. Marcus, Mrs. Wellington, and Mr. Rodriguez were all there now, forming an impromptu crisis committee. The basement was taking on water at an alarming rate, now over 4 inches deep and rising. "This is a legitimate emergency," Chief Santos said after examining the situation. "If this water reaches electrical equipment or your furnace, you're looking at fire hazards and gas hazards." "You said your generator is at an impound lot." "Yes, but they're closed until Monday." He frowned and pulled out his phone, making a call to someone. After a brief conversation, he turned back to us. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to classify this as an imminent hazard situation. That gives me authority to order the impound lot to release essential equipment needed to mitigate an emergency. Give me the lot address." Hope surged through my chest for the first time in hours. Chief Santos made several more calls, including one to the Springfield Police Department to request assistance in getting the impound lot operator to respond after hours. While we waited, he helped Marcus and the others start moving valuable items from their basements to higher ground. I tried calling Sharon again to inform her what was happening, thinking maybe official fire department involvement would make her take this seriously. Still no answer. By 8 p.m., a police officer named Delgado had arrived and helped Chief Santos contact the impound lot owner, a man named Jerry who was extremely unhappy about being called out on a Friday evening. But when Chief Santos explained it was an official emergency order, Jerry grudgingly agreed to meet us at the lot. I rode with Chief Santos to the impound lot, where Jerry, a grumpy man in his 60s wearing a grease-stained jacket, unlocked the gates. "This better be a real emergency," he muttered. "That HOA lady paid me $200 to prioritize this tow and hold the equipment for the weekend." "She what?" I stared at him. "Sharon paid you extra to make sure I couldn't get it back until Monday." "Not my business," Jerry said, walking toward my generator cart. "I just do the jobs I'm hired for." That revelation made everything click into place. Sharon hadn't just enforced an HOA rule. She had actively conspired to make sure I couldn't remedy the situation quickly. She had weaponized the impound process. We loaded my generator cart into my truck, and I drove back to my house faster than I probably should have. By the time I had the generator wheeled into position, connected to my transfer switch, and started up, it was nearly 9 p.m. The familiar rumble of the engine was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Within seconds, my house lights flickered on, and more importantly, I heard the Sump pump motor kick on in the crawlspace. The pump had a lot of work to do. It ran continuously for the next 45 minutes, evacuating the accumulated water from all 6 basements. I went to each house, checking water levels, making sure the discharge was working properly. Gradually, the flooding receded. By 10:30 p.m., the basements were mostly dry again, though they all showed evidence of water damage. Stained carpet, warped drywall, damaged stored items. Marcus's home office was ruined. His desk had sat in 3 inches of water for hours, destroying his computer tower, his filing cabinets full of patient records, and his expensive ergonomic chair. Mrs. Wellington's new carpet was soaked and would need to be replaced. Mrs. Grimes had lost several boxes of family photographs and mementos stored in cardboard boxes on her basement floor. The Rodriguezes had a finished basement with a home theater system. The water had reached their media console and shorted out several components. I documented everything with photos and videos, getting statements from each homeowner. The total estimated damage across all 6 properties was approaching $70,000, and that was a conservative estimate before professional restoration companies had assessed everything. The power came back on at 11:40 p.m., which was actually faster than predicted. I left my generator running for another hour just to make sure the sump pump could catch up completely, then shut it down and went back inside my house, exhausted and furious. Saturday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from the affected homeowners, but several were from other neighbors who had heard about what happened. The mood was mutinous. Even people who weren't directly affected by the flooding were outraged that the HOA had caused such destruction over an aesthetic complaint. At 9 a.m., my doorbell rang. It was Sharon Patterson, and she looked significantly less composed than yesterday. Her hair wasn't styled, she wore minimal makeup, and her expression was pinched with stress. "Isaac, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "Now you want to talk. After 6 basements flooded because you had my generator towed during an emergency." "I didn't know about the sump pump situation," she said defensively. "You never submitted the proper documentation about shared systems. Because it was already documented 15 years ago when the houses were built. This isn't some secret modification I made. It's part of the original construction plans filed with the county. You would know that if you bothered to look at the subdivision records before power tripping over HOA rules." Her face flushed. "The HOA board is meeting this morning to discuss the situation. We'd like you to be there." "Oh, now you want my input. Yesterday you were happy to slam your door in my face." "Things have changed," she said, her voice tight. "Marcus Wellington has threatened to sue the HOA for damages. So have the Rodriguezes and Mrs. Grimes. Our insurance company has been calling me since 7 a.m. They want a full incident report." "Good. They should know exactly what happened. You had essential emergency equipment impounded during a power outage out of spite, and now multiple families are dealing with property damage that could have been completely prevented." Sharon's jaw clenched. "It wasn't spite. It was enforcement of community standards that you repeatedly violated." "During a power outage, Sharon, what part of that seems reasonable to you?" She didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she said, "The board meeting is at 10 a.m. at my house. Please be there so we can resolve this situation." The HOA board consisted of Sharon as president, Todd Brennan as vice president, and Linda Martinez as treasurer. They met in Sharon's dining room, which felt absurdly formal given the circumstances. I sat across from them with a folder full of documentation. Photos of the damage, the original building plans showing the shared sump pump system, the property disclosure I had received when buying my house, and printed copies of the HOA covenant and bylaws. Todd was a real estate agent in his late 40s, friendly in a professional way but ultimately loyal to Sharon. Linda was more independent-minded, a software engineer who had always struck me as reasonable. She looked uncomfortable as the meeting began. "Let's start by acknowledging that this situation is unfortunate," Sharon began, using her boardroom voice. "However, the HOA acted within its authority by enforcing the community covenants. Isaac, you were given 2 written warnings about the generator cart violating aesthetic standards. You ignored both warnings." "Because I had applied for a variance," I countered, "which you denied without even reading my application explaining why the generator was necessary." "We denied it because you didn't follow the proper procedure," Todd interjected. "You needed to submit architectural plans for approved screening before we could consider a variance. I submitted photos showing that the generator is barely visible from the street. It's on the side of my house, painted neutral gray, only visible if you walk down my driveway. What more screening do you want? That's not the point, Sharon said. The point is following established procedures. Rules apply to everyone equally, even when following those rules causes tens of thousands of dollars in preventable damage. I opened my folder and spread photos across the dining table. This is Marcus Wellington's basement. That's his ruined home office. Here's Mrs. Grimes's destroyed photo albums. These are irreplaceable family memories. The Rodriguez family's home theater system destroyed. Mrs. Wellington's brand new renovation ruined. All of this happened because you had my generator towed during an active power outage without bothering to understand why it was there. Linda picked up one of the photos, studying it with a troubled expression. Sharon, did you know about the shared sump pump system? Of course not. That information wasn't in any of my records. It's in the county building records, I said. It's in the original subdivision plans. It's in my property disclosure. You didn't know about it because you didn't bother to look. You saw a rule violation and acted without considering consequences. We can't be expected to know every detail about every house in the subdivision, Sharon snapped. You can be expected to do basic due diligence before confiscating emergency equipment during a disaster, I shot back. And another thing. I pulled out the receipt I had gotten from Jerry at the impound lot, which he had given me when I retrieved my generator. You paid the towing company extra to prioritize my tow and hold my equipment through the weekend. That's not rule enforcement. That's vindictive. Sharon's face went pale. Todd and Linda both turned to stare at her. That's not true, she stammered. It's right here in writing. Jerry documented the extra $200. You paid him to make sure I couldn't get my generator back until Monday. You deliberately created a situation where the flooding would be worse. That's not an HOA president enforcing rules. That's someone abusing their authority to punish a homeowner they don't like. Linda set down the photo she had been holding. Sharon, is this true? I was ensuring compliance, Sharon said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isaac has been a problem homeowner since I took office. Always questioning decisions, always pushing back on rules. I wanted to make it clear that the HOA board's authority isn't optional. By causing $70,000 in property damage, Linda's voice rose. That's not leadership, Sharon. That's a power trip that's going to bankrupt our HOA when everyone sues us. Todd cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should discuss this privately and reconvene with Isaac later. No, I said firmly. We're finishing this now. Here's what's going to happen. The HOA is going to take full responsibility for the damages. Your insurance will cover the restoration costs for all 6 affected homes. I'm getting my variance approved immediately with no screening requirements since the generator clearly wasn't a legitimate aesthetic problem. And Sharon is going to resign as HOA president. Sharon's head snapped up. Absolutely not. You can't make demands like that. Watch me. Because if the HOA doesn't take responsibility, I'm not the only one suing. You're looking at 6 separate lawsuits from 6 different homeowners. Our HOA has 86 homes. Divide $70,000 in damages plus legal fees plus settlements among 86 families, and you're looking at special assessments of at least $1,000 per household, probably more. How many of our neighbors do you think will appreciate that? Linda was nodding. He's right. This is a disaster. Our insurance premiums are going to skyrocket even if they do cover the claims. I did what I thought was right, Sharon insisted. I was protecting property values by maintaining our community standards. You cost the community tens of thousands of dollars over a generator cart that wasn't bothering anyone, Todd said, and I could hear his loyalty wavering. Sharon, this is indefensible. The meeting deteriorated from there. Sharon refused to resign. Linda and Todd refused to back her position. I left after an hour with no resolution, but I could tell the board was fracturing. That afternoon, I received a call from Marcus. Isaac, I just got off the phone with a lawyer. She says we have an excellent case against the HOA and possibly against Sharon personally for willful misconduct. That payment she made to the impound lot to hold your generator is evidence of malicious intent. I'm talking to a lawyer on Monday too, I said. But honestly, I just want everyone's damages covered and this whole thing resolved. I don't want to drag this out for months. I hear you, but my wife wants blood. Our basement is gutted. The restoration company estimates $15,000 in repairs just for our house. We can't afford that out of pocket. Over the weekend, the situation escalated. Word spread through the neighborhood about what had happened. On Sunday morning, someone had printed flyers detailing the incident and placed them on every doorstep in Meadowbrook Commons. The flyers included photos of the flooded basements and a detailed timeline of events. They also mentioned the extra payment Sharon had made to ensure the generator stayed impounded. By Sunday afternoon, Sharon was receiving angry calls and emails from dozens of homeowners who were furious about the potential financial liability. Several people showed up at her house demanding answers. I watched from my window as Sharon tried to calm an angry crowd on her front lawn, looking increasingly desperate. Monday morning brought more developments. The restoration companies began work in earnest, pumping out residual moisture and removing damaged materials. The Wellington's basement was completely gutted, exposing studs and concrete. Mrs. Grimes sat in her living room crying while workers carried out ruined boxes of memories. The damage looked even worse in daylight. I met with a lawyer named Patricia Foster at 10 a.m. She was a property law specialist who listened to my story with increasing interest. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of HOA overreach I've seen. You have documentation, witnesses, physical damage, and evidence of malicious intent. Any mediator or judge will side with you immediately." "I don't want this to drag on," I told her. "These are my neighbors. I have to keep living here." Then we push for immediate mediation and settlement. I'll draft a demand letter to the HOA board outlining your damages and those of the other affected homeowners. Given the liability exposure, they'll want to settle quickly before this turns into a long legal battle. Patricia worked fast. By Tuesday morning, the HOA board received a detailed demand letter on behalf of all 6 affected homeowners. The letter outlined the damages, the evidence of wrongdoing, and the legal consequences if the matter wasn't resolved immediately. It proposed binding mediation within 2 weeks. That same day, I received a call from Linda Martinez. "Isaac, I wanted you to know that Todd and I asked for Sharon's resignation yesterday. She refused. So we called for a special election to remove her as president. According to our bylaws, we need a 2/3 vote of homeowners to remove a board member for cause. You think you'll get it?" After what happened? Absolutely. We're scheduling the vote for this Saturday. I hope you'll attend. The special election was held in the Meadowbrook Commons clubhouse on Saturday morning. I had never seen so many neighbors in one place. The room was packed with over 60 homeowners, an extraordinary turnout for a subdivision that usually struggled to get 20 people to annual meetings. Sharon sat at the front table looking defiant but cornered. Linda Martinez acted as moderator, explaining the situation professionally but clearly. She outlined the timeline of events, the damages incurred, and the financial liability facing the HOA. Then she opened the floor for discussion. Marka stood up first. I want everyone here to understand what happened. Because Sharon Patterson decided an aesthetic violation was more important than common sense or basic human decency, my family lost $15,000 in property. My wife's dream office is destroyed. Our home theater gone. This wasn't an accident. Sharon paid extra money to make sure Isaac couldn't get his generator back, knowing full well it would make the situation worse. Several people gasped. Apparently, that detail hadn't made it into the neighborhood gossip mill yet, Mrs. Grimes stood next, her voice trembling. I lost photographs of my late husband. 40 years of memories destroyed because they sat in cardboard boxes that got soaked. You can't put a price on that kind of loss. Those photographs are gone forever. And for what? Because a generator cart was visible from the street. One by one, the affected homeowners spoke. The damage estimates kept rising as more details emerged. Mrs. Wellington mentioned that they had discovered mold starting to form in their walls, requiring additional remediation. The Rodriguezes revealed that their homeowner's insurance had denied their claim, calling it a flood not covered by their policy, meaning they were fully out of pocket for their losses. Then Sharon stood to defend herself. I understand emotions are running high, but I was doing my job as HOA president. Isaac Donovan repeatedly violated our community covenants. I gave him warnings. He ignored them. What kind of message does it send if the board doesn't enforce our rules? We can't just let people do whatever they want. Even during an emergency, someone called out. I didn't know it was an emergency, Sharon replied. How was I supposed to know about some obscure shared system from 15 years ago? By doing your homework before taking extreme action, Linda said sharply. By asking questions before confiscating someone's property. By using basic common sense during a power outage. The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. When the vote was finally called, 72 homeowners voted to remove Sharon as HOA president. 8 voted against, likely Sharon's closest friends in the neighborhood. It was one of the most lopsided votes in Meadowbrook Commons history. Sharon left the meeting without saying another word, her face set in rigid lines of humiliation and anger. Linda Martinez was appointed interim president, with a promise to hold proper elections for all board positions within 60 days. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize for not speaking up sooner about Sharon's increasingly aggressive rule enforcement. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had been targeted. One family had been fined $500 for leaving their garbage cans visible from the street for 2 hours past the pickup deadline. Another had been threatened with daily fines for having the wrong shade of mailbox black. Sharon had been building a record of petty tyranny that people had tolerated until it resulted in real, significant damage. The mediation happened 2 weeks later in a conference room at a local law office. All 6 affected homeowners attended with our lawyers. The HOA was represented by Linda Martinez, Todd Brennan, and the HOA's insurance company lawyer, a stern woman named Jennifer Walsh. The mediation lasted all day. We went through each property's damages line by line, reviewing estimates from restoration companies, insurance adjusters, and contractors. Jennifer Walsh tried to minimize some claims, arguing that certain items would have been replaced eventually anyway. Patricia Foster shut that down quickly, pointing out that depreciation wasn't the homeowner's problem when the damage was caused by the HOA's wrongful actions. By 5 p.m., we had reached a settlement. The HOA's insurance would pay for all restoration and repairs, totaling $63,000 after negotiation. Additionally, Each affected homeowner would receive a $5,000 payment for inconvenience, emotional distress, and items that couldn't be fully restored like Mrs. Grimes's photographs. The HOA would also pay all legal fees. Most importantly, the settlement included policy changes. The HOA board would be required to obtain engineering assessments before taking any enforcement action involving mechanical equipment. A new appeals process was created for homeowners to challenge board decisions before penalties were enforced. And the HOA covenant was amended to explicitly allow emergency generators without requiring pre-approval or screening. I left the mediation feeling drained but vindicated. The financial settlement didn't really matter to me since my own basement hadn't been badly damaged. Being the house where the pump was located meant water accumulated last there. But knowing that my neighbors would be made whole, and that Sharon's reign of petty tyranny had been permanently ended, gave me some satisfaction. The restoration work continued for several more weeks. The Wellingtons had their entire basement professionally refinished, actually upgrading several features in the process. Mrs. Grimes used her settlement money to have the remaining photographs professionally digitized and restored. The Rodriguez family installed a new, even better home theater system, and they invited the whole neighborhood to a movie night once it was complete. Sharon Patterson remained in her house, but became increasingly isolated. She stopped attending neighborhood events. Her husband, a quiet man I had rarely seen, left her according to neighborhood gossip about 3 months after the incident. The house went up for sale in June and sold by August. I never spoke to Sharon again after the mediation. The HOA elections in April brought in a completely new board. Linda Martinez was elected president officially, along with 2 new members who ran on a platform of common sense governance and transparency. One of their first acts was to conduct a comprehensive review of all the subdivision's shared systems and infrastructure, documenting everything properly so no future board members would be caught off guard. They discovered several other interesting shared systems that Robert Chen had designed. Apparently, our cluster of 6 houses wasn't the only one with unusual configurations. 3 houses on the other side of the subdivision shared a geothermal heating system with a common ground loop. Another cluster shared a graywater recycling system for irrigation. All of these systems were documented in county records, but had never been properly incorporated into HOA knowledge. Linda hired an engineering firm to map everything and create a master infrastructure plan for Meadowbrook Commons. It cost the HOA $12,000, but everyone agreed it was money well spent to prevent future disasters. My generator cart remained exactly where it had always been on the side of my house, painted neutral gray. After the settlement, the HOA board sent me a formal letter explicitly authorizing its placement and thanking me for maintaining the shared Sump pump system. Several neighbors who had previously ignored me suddenly became friendly, inviting me to barbecues and block parties. Marcus Wellington became a good friend. We started a tradition of quarterly poker nights with some of the other guys from the neighborhood. During one of these nights in July, Marcus raised his beer and said, "Here's to Isaac, whose generator cart saved our basements." Eventually, everyone laughed and clinked glasses. It had become a running joke among the group, the absurd story we would tell at parties for years to come. But underneath, the humor was a real recognition of how quickly things could go wrong when people prioritized rules over reality, authority over common sense. The real postscript to the story came in September. I received a subpoena to testify in a lawsuit that I hadn't known existed. Apparently, after Sharon Patterson lost her position and her house went up for sale, She had filed a countersuit against several homeowners, including me, claiming defamation and emotional distress. She argued that she had been unfairly scapegoated for doing her job and that the public humiliation had destroyed her reputation and her marriage. Patricia Foster represented me again. She seemed almost amused by Sharon's lawsuit. "This is desperation," she told me. "She's financially underwater from the divorce and probably looking for any source of income. But she has no case. Everything that happened is documented. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation." The lawsuit was dismissed within 3 months. The judge issued a scathing ruling that cited Sharon's own documented actions, including the payment to keep my generator impounded, as evidence that the criticism against her was not only true but understated. He also ordered Sharon to pay the defendant's legal fees for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Sharon had moved to Arizona to live with her sister. Apparently, the combination of legal fees, divorce costs, and the underwater value on her house after the rushed sale had left her in serious financial trouble. I tried to feel sympathy for her, but mostly I just felt tired. The whole situation had been so unnecessary. By the time winter rolled around again, and we faced our first major power outage since the incident, things were different. The power went out on a Tuesday evening in late November due to an ice storm. My generator cart was ready. I wheeled it out, connected it to my transfer switch, and started it up without any concern that someone would tow it away. Marcus texted me within minutes. "The beautiful sound of that generator is like music to my ears. My basement is staying dry and I'm watching TV. You're a hero, man." I smiled and texted back, "Just doing my job. That generator isn't going anywhere." And it didn't. The power was restored after 6 hours. The sump pump ran perfectly throughout. All 6 basements stayed completely dry. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work, now that nobody was sabotaging it in the name of aesthetic standards. The incident became something of a legend in Meadowbrook Commons. New homeowners who moved into the subdivision would hear the story, usually embellished a bit in the retelling. Some versions had Sharon arrested, which didn't actually happen but made for a better story. Other versions had me breaking into the impound lot to steal my generator back, which also didn't happen but sounded dramatic. The truth was messy and frustrating and expensive, but ultimately it was a story about community. About neighbors coming together when one person's authoritarian impulses threatened everyone's well-being. About standing up to petty tyranny even when it's uncomfortable. About the importance of understanding the infrastructure that keeps our homes safe and functional. I kept in touch with Patricia Foster. She told me that she used my case as an example in her practice, cautioning other HOA boards about the dangers of overzealous enforcement without proper investigation. Apparently, similar situations happened more often than I would have guessed, though usually without such dramatic consequences. Mrs. Grimes passed away in March of the following year, peacefully in her sleep at age 86. At her memorial service, her daughter thanked me for trying to protect her mother's photographs, even though many had been lost. She said her mother had talked often about the kindness of neighbors during that difficult time, and how the experience had reminded her that community was more important than any physical possessions. That put things in perspective for me. The whole incident had been about more than just property damage or HOA politics. It had been about how we treat each other, how we respond to emergencies, how we balance rules with compassion and common sense. The generator cart still sits on the side of my house. I maintain it carefully, testing it monthly, changing the oil regularly, making sure it's always ready for the next outage. It's not just powering my house anymore. It's a reminder of what can go wrong when authority becomes more important than responsibility, when rules become more important than people, and whenever there's a thunderstorm or ice storm or any threat to our power, I get text messages from my neighbors. Generator ready. I always respond the same way. Always ready. Basement staying dry. Because that's what neighbors do. We look out for each other. We protect shared systems even when nobody notices. We stand up to petty tyrants who abuse authority. And when necessary, we fight back against injustice, even when it's inconvenient and uncomfortable. The HOA never bothered me about the generator again. Linda Martinez served as president for 2 years before stepping down to focus on her career. The board that replaced her was just as reasonable and competent. Meadowbrook Commons became a better place to live, not because of rules or covenants or enforcement, but because people learned to treat each other with respect and common sense. My generator cart had taught us all a valuable lesson. Sometimes the ugly, practical, necessary things in life matter more than aesthetic perfection. Sometimes the rumbling, mechanical, imperfect solutions are exactly what we need to keep our foundations dry and our homes safe. And sometimes standing up to a tyrannical HOA president named Sharon is the most important thing you can do for your community, even if it floods 6 basements in the process of teaching everyone that lesson. That generator still runs perfectly. The sump pump still keeps our basements dry. And I still live in Meadowbrook Commons, in a neighborhood that learned the hard way that community matters more than covenants, and that some rules deserve to be challenged when they threaten the welfare of the people they're supposed to protect. Sharon Patterson faded into memory, a cautionary tale about what happens when small authority goes to someone's head. But the rest of us moved forward, stronger and more united for having survived her tenure and the disaster she caused. The generator incident became part of our neighborhood identity, the story we tell to explain why our HOA board is so reasonable now, why we question rules that don't make sense, why we always think twice before enforcing covenants during emergencies. Every time I start that generator, hearing it rumble to life and knowing the sump pump is about to kick on, I think about that February night when everything went wrong. And then I think about how we fixed it, how we came together, how we made sure it would never happen again. That's what community means. That's what home means. Not perfect lawns and hidden garbage cans and approved paint colors, but people looking out for each other when it matters most, protecting the systems that keep everyone safe, and having the courage to stand up when authority becomes tyranny. My generator cart proved all of that. One ugly, practical, absolutely essential piece of equipment on wheels, running a sump pump that kept 6 basements dry, teaching a whole neighborhood what really matters when the lights go out.